some people that wanted to join us, but weren't able to make the time frame today. So welcome everyone. This is my taster webinar to my Archetypes and Soul Contracts online course that I do. It's an online self-paced course as well as live interaction, live Q&A. And I have a couple people that have worked with me before here on Archetypes, and one who's in my right now in the course. And for myself doing this work, I find it to be very powerful, and it's been very transformational for me working with archetypes. So before I go down that road, I'm going to first introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Teresa Campos, and I wear several archetypal hats, as we all do. So I wear the hat of the intuitive, the spiritual teacher, the astrologer, and tonight the archetypal certified consultant. And I was certified from CMED, and CMED is the Carolyn Mace education. So I spent 3 years doing this coursework and studying her work, which was sacred contracts. And it's in this work of sacred contracts that we dove into the world of archetypes. And what was so fascinating about this dive into archetypes is that when you open the door to work, to any kind of work that you're doing, this soul work, it's like you are answered with exactly what it is that you're asking. So the first night that I had the experience of being introduced to archetypes, that night I hardly slept. I hardly slept because the archetypes, it's like they were alive in the room with me. They came alive, and it was the journey that really brought me to the place that I am today in the work that I do. It's through looking at these archetypes and looking at which ones have been with me my whole entire life. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of archetypes, but there's ones that we resonate with, that really align with our story. There's ones that align with our story, and then there's ones that align with our soul. So doing this work through the course of the 3 years, what I discovered at the end of this is that this was a calling for me. And it wasn't necessarily doing archetypes, but it was going down the spiritual path of helping others to see themselves and doing transformational work. So this was life-changing for me. So this work for me has been very powerful, as I said. And simultaneously, when I began this program, is when I had an astrology reading, and there's one of my fellow astrologers here on the Zoom today, Sandy, and that's where I met Sandy. And what was so beautiful about this is that the astrological wheel is also one of the tools that are partner with the archetypes. And that may not mean something to some of you who don't understand the astrological wheel, but it's each of the houses in the astrological wheel are a department of life. And so in those departments of life, when you're working with the archetypes, your archetypes find their place in each of those houses, and they begin to tell a story. And what's so fascinating about this is that it's so right on. When you work with these archetypes and you start to really get into the deeper work with it, you see how much it's like they speak to you in a way that you're able to see yourself from perspectives that otherwise would have been difficult to see. And that's what's so beautiful, is it becomes a holographic tool. So we're not just looking at ourselves from a 3D dimensional way, we're able to see ourselves holographically and all the different hats and aspects that we wear, and also the sacred contracts. And what I mean by a sacred contract are the relationships that we have in our lives, some that last our whole entire life, some that last a day, some that last 3 months, 5 years, you name it. We have these contracts, and these relationships with people that we are actually contracted with, and our archetypes will meet. And that's what is also so amazing about this, is that many times you'll find a queen with a prince. It's not often that one finds a queen with a king, or because we have this whole alpha energy versus a more feminine energy. So when you start getting into understanding all of these dynamics, you'll see, wow, I see who my partner is, and I can see why we struggle, because maybe we're struggling from the shadow side of a particular archetype. So the other thing about this work with archetypes is that it has its roots. The roots go pretty far back, and I mean, they go back to ancient times, because that's how the planets were studied. They were studied based on what archetype and what were the social ethos at the time when the planets were discovered, and therefore they take on an archetypal, the archetypal influences of the social ethos of that time. So depth psychologist Carl Jung, and I'm sure many of you have heard of him, he's the one who coined the word archetype and who brought that more into the forefront here of what we know in psychology, and also where Carolyn derived her work from was from the Carl Jung work of archetypes. He also coined the word the shadow and the collective unconscious. And one of his quotes is that we see ourselves in a thousand faces. And I love that quote because it's so true. And working with this archetypes, that's what it allows us to do. It allows us to see our child archetype in a way that we haven't. It allows us to see our saboteur. It also gives us the opportunity to know what the prostitute is in our life, and how she interacts or he interacts, and also the victim. And those of you who have worked with me personally know I speak a lot about the victim archetype. Actually, I speak a lot about these 4 basic survival archetypes. And those are the ones that I'm going to be going over and we're going to be talking about today. Okay, you guys good? Right on, cool. So this, I'm going to speak a little bit about the course that I have, and then I'm going to go into the content here. So I chose to make this archetypal work an evergreen, and evergreen means that one can jump in at any time. So I have the content, I have the base of all the content in an online course, and in it are the PDFs that you need, the written content that you need, and the videos that I have created to take you through all the steps of how you begin to cast a chart. And so I have coupled that with this 3-month online, or excuse me, live Zoom Q&As, which we meet every other Tuesday. And that is the opportunity where we dive into the work and we ask the questions that we need to ask, and I take you through whatever needs to be taken through. I also have an app that I use called Band, B-A-N-D, and it's rather than like a Facebook and having to join another social media in the way that, you know, we sometimes have to do, Band gives us an opportunity to have a conversation. I'll post videos from time to time, and that's where we can speak in between. So I do check that every day. And Dree, I did get your message. I just haven't had a chance to respond to it. So I am on that. Okay, so now I'm going to move into talking about what an archetype is for those of you who don't fully understand what it is. So an archetype is a universal pattern or symbol that we all generally experience or recognize in some form. But each of us will have a different idea of what that archetype means to us based on our early childhood conditioning and just our experience in life, period. So for example, I'm going to take the archetype of marriage. The archetype of marriage for some people means one thing and for others means something else. Let me bring a couple people here into the room. There we go. Okay, so that is part of the nuances of an archetype, is that everybody will have their own experience of it. And when I get into the child archetype, you're going to understand what I mean. And I'm going to give you some descriptions of the different child archetypes, and you're going to start to understand what I mean by that, because so many of our experiences have been, you know, we've been challenged in our childhood in some ways, and maybe some we haven't, but I'm going to say we have. And so therefore, we're going to have a different experience of what the child archetype is for each of us. So The other thing, and I'm not here to talk about astrology, but I just, for an example, like I said earlier, the planets and the signs are also archetypes. And so a lot of times when I'm doing my articles, like right now, I just put an article out for Scorpio. And I always say, just because you don't have Scorpio in your chart does not mean that you do not have some type of a relationship to the energy of Scorpio. We all have an energy to all of these because we're all connected, and therefore we're all affected by them, some of us more so than others. So just like with these archetypes, there's some people who have a really strong mother archetype. And just because you're a mother doesn't mean you have the mother archetype really strong in your life and in your chart. And in this tool, it's used as we use 4 basic archetypes, and then we add 8 more. But this doesn't mean you're limited to just that. But these 12 archetypes and how they fit so perfectly with the astrological wheel is how you begin to understand your story. And when I was doing this work and I was studying astrology, I remember when I learned how this all worked, I was just so taken back because I laid those archetypes on top of my astrology chart in each of those houses, and it was just so aligned with how my chart was set up. And I know that that's kind of hard to understand, but as I go further, it'll make more sense. Okay, so let's dive into the 4 basic archetypes. I said the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. And I'm going to break those down for you. So let's start with the child archetype. So this is the beginning point of our life, the child. This establishes our perceptions to life, our perception to security, how we were nurtured or not nurtured, our relationship to our family. And this is where we confront our inner child. You know, our child, doing our inner child work is vital to the individuation of self. Because if we have not done our inner child work on some level, then we're still going to be attached to the relationship to mother in our lives, to that, looking for that mother surrogate constantly in our lives, and unable to create autonomy for ourselves. And so the child archetype and how we experience life will be determined by how you internalized it. Because we all know when we talk to our siblings, those of us who have siblings, and we look at one sibling's experience compared to the other, can be totally different, totally different. So I'm going to start here I'm going to go through each of the child archetypes. You know, there are many more. And what I mean by that is that, let's see, I'm going to go through I'm going to go through 6 of them. And what I've come to recognize in doing this work is that sometimes the child that I'm describing may not align with you. And so then you find your own description or identity of what child aligns with you. But as I go through these, I think that most of you are going to be able to relate to one or more. But the work here is to find the one that is most aligned with you. Okay. So let's start with the magical child, which can be the magical or the innocent child. And every archetype has a shadow aspect and it has a light aspect to it as well. So the light aspect of the magical child is the belief that anything is possible. It has a view of life that is very positive, optimistic, and it sees the potential. Even if life is not going the way it seems like it needs to be going, that magical, that innocent child will just, it just believes. It just believes. And that is truly, it's beautiful. That energy is beautiful. Now, a shadow that can come in with the magical child is that not facing the reality of what life is, of what's going on. And so that can be a shadow of the magical child. Another shadow of the magical child could be seeing the glass half full. And this is very indicative of when we have been wounded in such a way to where we only see that negative part of life. We only see the glass half full, and we become very linear thinkings, like our magic is lost. And I truly believe, I always say this when I'm teaching this, I truly believe we all have an aspect of this magical child. I think that every one of us do. And so that gets tainted and changed as we move through life for some of us. So that linear thinking, like no longer believing in magic. And I'm going to say that believing in magic for us, even as an adult, is so important for our lives, to believe things are possible, that magic is possible, that miracles are possible. And that all has to do with our relationship to spirit, to divine, God, source, what we trust, our belief system. The other piece about this work is that it really taps us into our belief system. What do you believe to be true about life? That's what you begin to see as you start working with the shadows of these archetypes, as you start really seeing your belief systems in a way that you probably haven't before. And then this is how we find those subconscious patterns that are still running in the background program of our lives, is by going in through these shadow archetypes. And the other thing is that when our innocence was taken from us as a child, that's where that magic gets lost. That's where that innocence gets lost, in the magical child. The next child is the eternal child. And this is someone, in the light of the eternal child, is someone with a very open mind, someone who is, just has that vital, youthful energy that they exude. And I'm sure that you probably have known people that are like that. You just feel it from them. They just have this youthful spirit about them. The shadow of the eternal child is the inability to grow up and take responsibility. And those would be children that maybe never left home, or, and just couldn't go out, and mothers constantly enabling, being codependent with them. And so that eternal child is dependent upon the physical and emotional security of others, and will look for, mother surrogates or family surrogates out there because it's so dependent. The next one is the orphan child, or the abandoned child. And the light of the abandoned or orphan child is independence. That is what's learned from the wound, is independence, being able to conquer the fear of survival. The shadow of this is the feelings of abandonment, and betrayal typically always comes in with this. Of course, when we're abandoned, there's that also the wound of betrayal that enters in. And another shadow aspect is being unable to advocate for oneself. And again, looking for the surrogate who can take care of me, because I can't take care of myself. The next child is the nature child. And this, of course, is the connection with nature, the animal kingdom. And this is where the animal kingdom is revered just as equally as the human kingdom. And I believe that is something that is growing so much here on our planet, period, is seeing the value of the equality in that, which is very beautiful. But that nature child is one that just, it's that connection, that deep connection. And I know that you, like, either you're that yourself, or somebody that's, they're just so nature oriented. The shadow of that is the feeling of victimization from people, where the relationship to nature and animals becomes more the equal, and an inability to relate to those around them. Like, I feel more comfortable with my animals, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but when we hide out in that way, and that becomes the security, and we can only connect with animals. Like I know somebody who's like that, like their animal is so important to them, which I understand, just like a child would be, but that becomes their only place they can connect deeply, because there's no fear of being hurt. or abandoned, whatever it may be. The divine child. So here it speaks for itself. It's a really strong connection to the divine. And there's some children who, growing up, that I've spoken to, who've said, I've always felt like I'd be taken care of, and possibly have conversations with God. The shadow of this can be the expectations that one will always be taken care of, and that one does not have to take the actions for them to be taken care of. Their expectations that, oh, it'll just work out. Oh, it'll just work out. And not to say that can't happen, but it's when we know, when we get to that point where one is not taking responsibility in some way. And the last child I'm going to bring up here is the wounded child. And you might say, well, aren't these all wounded on some level? And yes, they are. Yes, on some level, I would imagine, I'm going to speak for myself, that there definitely is some wounding here. Let me just see if there's somebody. There we go. Let somebody in. Okay. So that wounded child, the light of the wounded child is it awakens us to compassion when we have had these experiences in our life. And not that you cannot awaken to compassion in other ways, but this definitely is a direct association to compassion. And it also opens a path of forgiveness. The light of the wounded child in that experience. And the shadow of it is the struggle to move on, is the struggle to let go of the story. We're caught in the story, we spin in the story, we resist, we blame. And therefore never being able to get to that path of forgiveness. You guys doing all right? Cool. All right. Anybody have any questions on the child? We're good? Okay. So, as I said, when I started with the child, this archetype is the beginning point. Oh, let me ask a question. You guys can just raise your hands. Were you able to find what maybe your archetype relates most closely to you by me describing these? Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, right. Thank you. Okay. All right. So it's the beginning point. And so how we experience this, probably both in its shadow and its light, then that determines how life moves from there forward. So I'm gonna, I typically, the place to go here is the victim, but I'm not gonna go to the victim yet because that one is, that one's gonna be big. So I'm gonna go to the prostitute. That's where I'm gonna go next. So the prostitute archetype is where you meet your relationship to trust and faith. Okay. I'm going to back up one second. The child archetype is the guardian of innocence. Okay. The prostitute archetype is the guardian of faith. So this is where we learn how willing we are to negotiate our power. Without faith and trust in ourselves, we will meet a price that we cannot turn down. This archetype is also related to seduction. I would say money and sex are probably the biggest issues in this prostitute archetype. Money, sex, and security, right? Well, security kind of does it all for us, but we'll see, that's where we'll see this archetype show up. The other thing that I have come to understand about these archetypes is that they have a feminine or a masculine quality to them, and it's personal. It's personal. For some people, their victim can be masculine or their prostitute can be masculine. For some, it could be feminine. It has nothing to do with our own gender. And we kind of find that, we kind of feel that as we're moving through and working with these archetypes. Like what is this, a masculine or feminine energy? And that's important because that'll bring in some more pieces to the puzzle. So what determines whether we sell out has everything to do with our own personal value and how we see ourselves, our self-esteem. Do we trust ourselves? Do I value myself enough to say, no, I can make it on my own. I can do it. I don't need to do that. And this is common in relationships, of course, where we will prostitute ourselves. We'll do it for money. We'll do it for sex. We'll do it for whatever it is to be loved, basically, right? We will prostitute ourselves at work, in our jobs. We don't like it, but we do it. But I want to put a little caveat on that, is that if we are in a situation, for example, at our job, at our work, in our career that we're doing, and we're no longer satisfied with it, it's really important to examine that for ourselves, because there's a difference between selling ourselves out versus that we are there by choice. If we feel that we're not there by choice, we're going to feel like we're prostituting ourselves. Big difference there. It doesn't mean we have to be happy. Of course, hopefully we're going to make some changes to make it different, but it doesn't mean we have to be happy. But there's a difference between feeling at the effect of that and feeling we're prostituting ourselves. And then our victim archetype is going to come right in. Okay, the victim can't help from, it enters into all of these archetypes. It plays and just brings its insidious way of how it operates into these archetypes. The other thing about the prostitute archetype is where we will even sell our word. We will sell our word. We will say things that we know we don't believe or we don't feel, either to fit in, to make other people happy. This happens in families all the time. We're afraid to speak up, so we'll prostitute ourselves. And all the time we're negotiating our power. We're powerless. Any questions on the prostitute? We good? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Rachel. You have to unmute yourself.
So it interests me that I'm sure it's intuitively obvious to you by now that the child has so many aspects, whereas at least the prostitute does not. And I just want to know if you can make a little comment on that.
Yeah, well, we all have different childhoods, right? Because the prostitute it's the guardian of faith and trust. And so therefore it's like we all have that on some level. Like how do you what's your relationship to trust of life versus the child, like the nature child? Like I don't relate to the nature child like some people would. I love nature, but I'm not a nature child. I'm an orphan child. That's my experience of life. So this really helps to get it just more clear for ourselves to see those facets. I don't know if that was helpful, but that's a good question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, but you can see how the child needs to be much more descriptive.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the Saboteur. Now, the Saboteur archetype is the guardian of choice. So this is where we choose to either empower ourselves or disempower ourselves. This reflects our responsibility to whether we believe we can create something on our own. Because see, we'll sabotage ourselves for fear that we cannot create something, or that we will be we'll experience some kind of shame if we don't choose a particular thing. And so it really taps into again, it taps into some trust in life, but more than anything, it taps into us as co-creators. Like this is the creation point here. What do you choose? Because see, if we're choosing, we gotta really know where we're choosing from in our body. Are we choosing from fate, or are we choosing from destiny? And if we're choosing from fate, we're choosing from the tribal family origin and the family esteem and the family expectation of what it is that they think we should do, or even what society thinks we should do, what our culture thinks we should do, what religion thinks we should do. This is all sabotaging energy right here. So this is huge when it comes to our empowerment, because to choose something other than the status quo is scary. It's scary until we have, empowered ourselves enough to feel safe enough that we can do that. We are going to sabotage ourselves. And this, so I was thinking about this when I was earlier. So about an hour ago, to just ground myself, I got in the bathtub because that's what grounds me. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the time, and it's like I didn't want to get out. But I knew that if I stayed in, I was going to sabotage myself on time and feel pressure to get everything set up how I wanted to. And I had a little fight with myself. And it's those little simple things. It can be that simple. And then we're frustrated and we're rushed and I'm hot because I just got out of the bath, all that kind of stuff, right? So this is the voice in your head that says, do it or don't do it. Should I do it? Don't do it. And then what we want to ask is, whose voice is that? Because it's usually not our own voice. It's somebody else's voice. The other thing about the saboteur, one of the big fears with the saboteur is that we're inviting change into our life. And that, as simple as that sounds, that is huge. If I choose that, my life will change. So therefore, let me just go ahead and prostitute myself some more, because I don't want my life to change, although I do want my life to change, right? It's the loop. It's the loop. And this also goes back to, everything comes back to, on some level, our personal value and self-esteem. And it's also associated with our highest potential here. And actually, I want to say that differently. It's associated with our potential. And I don't like to say, potential is it's like a transitive verb. It's always in motion, right? We arrive and then we arrive again, and then we arrive again. That's what potential is. So this saboteur is all about moving us into potential, into the action of potential in our lives. And so we want to ask ourselves, like, what are we saying yes to? What are we saying no to in our lives?
Teresa?
Yeah.
Okay, another question.
Yeah.
It really strikes me to self-sabotage, to sabotage oneself or another is negative. So it strikes me that this archetype has such a negative weight rather than the potentializer. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it does. There is a light to the shadow, or to the saboteur, right?
Yes, but the word itself is still negative when in fact it's all it seems that the energy is mostly about achieving potential. I just find that confusing. That's all.
Okay. So you're saying that that for you in your brain, you think of, so sabotage is it override, the negativity overrides for you in your brain. Is that what you're saying?
Sabotage oneself or somebody else is a negative act, is it not?
Well, if it's done with malice, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the point that you're getting at. I understand what you're saying, but what's the point that you're getting at with this?
Talk about it. I don't want to take up more group time. We'll talk about it later, okay?
Okay. Well, so, but I don't want to just let that go. I really don't, because I think it's important to understand this in a way that fits right inside as you're hearing the descriptions of it. So yes, to self-sabotage is a negative thing, can be perceived, of course, as a negative thing. But we're looking at both the shadow and the light of these, because the light of the saboteur is empowerment.
Oh, okay.
So self-sabotage is the act of the saboteur in its shadow.
Okay, so yes, just the way the light of the victim is survival.
Well, that's part of it, but yes, the light of the victim is empowerment.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, yes. So the prostitute is the trust in self.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, awesome. Any more questions on that? Yes, Ruth.
What I'm feeling is the incongruency of the term saboteur and having a light. That's what I was wondering, if that's what she was also indicating. The term saboteur seems incongruent with having a light to it. It just feels like it would only have a shadow.
Okay, good. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because
That's what I was hearing her say, but maybe I'm wrong.
well,
And I could feel
regardless,
that.
that's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, so what I want to say to speak to that is archetypes are basically neutral. It's our experience of them. So the saboteur, what we've been conditioned to know about sabotage is that it's negative, and I would agree to that. When I hear the saboteur, I don't now, after doing this work, I don't necessarily think of something negative. It's like, what am I going to choose here? So we can choose to look at this from seeing it only from the shadow, but here it says, I'm going to invite you to see it from the light. Because this all has to do with the social conditioning of what it is. A word is a word. It's what we have given it, what we have labeled it, that determines how it feels for us and how we associate ourselves with that word. Okay, let's go to the victim. So the victim is my favorite. And it's my favorite because what I've come to learn about the victim archetype is that when you have worked this archetype and created some form, I'm saying some form of mastery with it, it changes your whole life. Am I right? I mean, for those of you who know this, it changes everything for us. Now, as the child was the beginning point, this is where I wanted to, because I knew I'd spend a little bit more time on the victim. As the child was the beginning point, our victim was introduced to us the first time our needs were not met in some way. And that's how we were introduced. And that's the first imprint. That is what has come to affect us our whole entire life. So the victim is the guardian of self-esteem. This is a primal fear here, the victim archetype, because one of the primal fears that was introduced to us at birth is that if we are abandoned, which would be a victimization, we would die. And that's a truth. And that's a truth. If we came out of the womb and we were not cared for, we would die. And so we are the only species that are born that can't get up and walk in a couple hours, right? We have to be cared for. Therefore, we are at the effect of our caretakers. And therefore, we are at the effect of our caretakers. And that's where this victim was introduced to us. So this is that feeling in the body of where we can go into flight, fight, or freeze. This is survival. When I'm working with astrology and I'm talking about somebody's moon, I talk about the child in the moon. I talk about the victim in the moon, that those two, it's like the child gets triggered and the victim ensues. When the child is feeling under threat, here comes the victim. And many people not many, but there are people that I have met and say, oh, I'm never a victim. But that's not the truth. We are always experience that victim archetype. But what determines whether we are a victim or not is how we respond to it. What is our reaction to it? We can't help from feeling this. It's part of the human experience. We're human beings. We're here to feel every single emotion. Love, hate, anger, all of those. We're not supposed to shut ourselves from all of that, because if we shut ourselves from any emotion, we are shutting ourselves off from ourself, and therefore it's in shadow. And whatever's in shadow, boom, wants to come out big. The more you suppress it, the more it's going to find ways to project itself onto other things. And so this victim archetype also has a partner, and that's the victimizer. So many times people will say, oh no, I'm not going to let anybody victimize me. And so what happens is they become the victimizer. And we will get into relationships where we are victim, victimizer, and we do this little loop and go back and forth. And one of the things I'll ask people when we're doing this work, like, what does your victim do? Like, how does it act out? For some people, they will act out with being just totally retreating. That's what their victim does. They go into poor me, they go into self-pity, they go into even self-deprecation, whatever that may be. Other people are going to lash out. They're going to victimize. So either we victimize another or we victimize ourselves. And the victim archetype also was, there's family inheritance here. If the family esteem was such where, it was a low family esteem, then that's going to be part of what we're having to unravel for ourselves as well, because that imprinting is part of our imprinting. The other thing about the victim archetype is it helps us to determine our boundaries, our personal boundaries, which really is our self-care. And so a strong victim energy is going to struggle with having good, healthy boundaries because they were crossed. Because that's what happens when we're victimized. Our boundaries are crossed in some way. And so the more that they become crossed, right, the more the boundary starts out here, and then it becomes, whoa, there's no boundary. And then we don't have boundaries in our life. And then we wonder why we're being victimized in our relationships and don't realize we're still playing out this dynamic in our subconscious, and these patternings are coming out, and, and then we're going, I don't know why this always happens. I don't know why I always get a boss that blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, this is all our own stuff here. The victim archetype also shows how we're oriented in life, how we see life. Is it all about me? And, the extreme of the victim is the narcissist. Because the victim says, oh, it's all about me. I'm hurt. And I want everybody to know that I'm hurt. And they take things very personally. It's a powerful archetype in its shadow, and it's a powerful archetype in its light. They all are, but especially this one. Because see, once you really get a handle on understanding the victim and seeing it and recognize it in your life, then you can recognize when you're sabotaging. You can recognize when you're prostituting. You know when your child's been animated, you've been triggered, and you can allow that feeling that you're having of, yeah, like right now, let's say something happened, I got triggered, and I'll say to myself, okay, yeah, like I'm having a moment, I'm triggered, and I can't stop from feeling like the victim has come up. The victim's here. It's definitely here. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to push it out. I don't want to lash out, and that's hard for me to do, but I don't want to lash out. But I want to be able to move through it. I want to be able to allow it to enter or be in my space and breathe through that and observe it and get curious about it. Because it has to come up and out and through our body. We can't stuff it down. This goes to our body image. I mean, you think about, we can go on and on about the victim archetype. We're coming up here on time. I guess I can go on and on with this information because there's so much to it. But there's some primary roles here with the victim archetype, as there are with each of these archetypes that I've spoken about today. And, when we have worked this victim archetype, like I said, this is where we come into our empowerment. This is where things aren't personal. We realize we get out of our personality. We get out of that personality self, and we get into the soul self, because we realize this is really not what it is, right? This is the story, and we all have to have a story. We all have to have a story, because that's where all the learning and the karmic lessons that are that we've come here to evolve. And that's how we find what we're here to do, is through our story. Like, we have to have history, but the key is we want to outgrow our history. We don't want our history to be bigger than the now, because many times our history is bigger than the now. So, any questions on this, or anything that's come up for you guys?
I have a question.
Yeah, who's asking that?
This is Peggy.
Oh, hey, Peggy.
Hey. So could my saboteur cause something to happen that my victim comes up and says, "You suck," or I love you, or are there relationships between the archetypes?
Absolutely, absolutely. They dance with each other. Yes, they do. Because it's like, you can make a choice to sabotage and then realize that you've done that, and then go into victim and victimize yourself and beat yourself up about it. Absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, Sandy.
I'm asking more about the class.
Yeah.
So in the class, do you relate the archetypes to the astrological kind of wheel and all of
I
that? Because that's
do.
what I'm very interested in.
Yeah. So I'm going to share screen, because I want to show you what we do here. Let's see, let's get the wheel up, and let's see, move it over and make it larger. All right. So Sandy, I know you're familiar with the wheel, but here's the astrological wheel. So what we do in the class is we pick our we first pull out of the deck our 4 basic archetypes, which is the 4 that I just went over, and your child. So you have 4. And then the next part of the work here is that this is the hard part, but it's the fun part, is you choose 8 of your own archetypes. And it's not just random, like there's a whole process to this of choosing your 8 archetypes. And so once you've chosen your 8 personal archetypes, then you have 12 total. So once you have 12 total, this is also a tool of divination. So that's how this is casted. It's casted through divination. So we shuffle the cards, we shuffle 12 other cards that are the 12 houses. And then, through a prayer meditation, we cast that blindly, and then we see where everything lands in our chart. And that's how we begin the interpretation. And the other thing about this is that, like, this is the archetypal wheel this chart is called the chart of origin, but it's also called the Chronos chart. And the reason why it's Chronos is because the Chronos is the dense energy of time. So these are the archetypes of your story. And the other thing is I add in here is the 2 other wheels. There's the Chronos wheel I just described, there's the Kairos wheel, and then there's the cosmic wheel. So more archetypes, a total of 36 archetypes actually come into this whole wheel. And I have a separate wheel that displays that. And that's where we start to look at, okay, if my prostitute is in the 4th house, where mine happens to be in the house of home, like, what other archetypes can help me move that energy and raise that vibration of that prostitute to bring her into her light, bring her into her sacredness. So that's the other thing that we do, is after we've created the 12 archetypes. And so what I've done with the class is that because it's online and self-paced, you can go at it when you register and begin, that you can join in at any time. So there isn't like, oh, this is the start date, although I have a start date to this because I needed to introduce it, which is November 10th. But if that doesn't work, then you start in December. But wherever you start, it's 3 months of time there. So it is every other week for 3 months. And then I offer, you know, if you want to keep going, then we keep going, you know, and there's a cost for that, but I give everybody a good rate on that and we keep going. So like the class I have now, I have a couple people that are going to be moving into this next cycle. And, you know, it's pretty cool. It's really great work, and we have fun, and we have crying sometimes too, but it's good. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you, Sandy, for asking that. Rachel. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Do we meet individually with you as well as in a class? I mean, I have to say 36 sounds unbelievable. Part of me is thinking, Jesus, that's a whole lot to juggle here. Even though, you know, I love to analyze. So A, it seems like a lot. And B, do we meet with you? Do we meet with the class? Both? How does that work?
We meet with the class. Okay. So we all meet on Zoom like this.
Mhm.
And then no, we don't meet individually. I can offer that. I do offer that if people want to do that. Yes. But, and I mean, that's great. If somebody wants to just really get into it by themselves, sure.
Mhm.
But it works. It actually works for us to do it the way that I've been doing it.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah, Anne.
And the time on Tuesday is what?
Yeah, so I alter the times because I have people on the East Coast. So like it's the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. The first Tuesday is at 12 p.m. The fourth Tuesday of the month, which is the second time in the month, is at 5:30 p.m. And we go for 90 minutes. And I do have, like I said, I have that app Band, which is pretty easy to get into. And that's where, you know, questions can be asked. If you have a question in the interim, I will post some videos of like, hey, I just want to give you like a 3-minute video of another aspect of the child, maybe that I had thought of, or that, you know, that I think I need to speak to because of what's going on in the world at the moment or something. And so that's another way of communicating. Not everybody likes to do that, but that's a choice. That's a choice.
I had a question.
Hi, Benji.
Hi, about those decks. Do you recommend getting?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I didn't bring up. So here's the deck.
Can't
It's
see it.
the archetype cards, Carolyn Mace. When you register, I put a link on Amazon for them, and they are, I think they're like $23 for the deck.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are a great deck. The other thing that we do is we use this as a tool of divination. So like in our last class, what we did, I asked everybody to ask, like, what question do you want answered? What do you need clarity on? And so we casted a chart, and that's another thing that we'll do. And then we read the chart, like, what does that chart say? And the cost of the class is $149 for the 3 months.
Okay.
Christine asked that. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's Sophie. Do you think we can work on several archetypes, you know, at the same time? Like, I mean, you know, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like, I'm sure it's all interconnected, but there's so many things that happen where you see that an archetype, you know, come up one day and then the next day it's another one. And, you know, just trying to work on one is already like pretty big, right? So
yeah, so you'll see them come up, and then when we first start, I'll focus on one, and I'll say, pay attention to this one for the next week. Like, just pay attention to the victim and watch that in your life. So you'll see them come in, like I said, when we open Pandora's box, right? When we open to something like this, then we start to see them in our lives and in our relationships.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, let me look at the chat really quick. Yeah, I answered that. Okay, so yeah, I would, you know, the one thing that I didn't do that I should have done is I did not put the link for the registration here in the chat, and it would be too difficult for me to do that right now. But I'm going to send Actually, it is in your emails that you received. I do have the link. If you're interested, I would love to have you on board. The class is not huge. I don't have a big class, but I have enough in there, which I like, so like right now, I think there's 11 of us in the class, and we only have one more of the women in this set, in this particular segment. So not sure how many I'll have. I know I have at least 4 in the next one. So it's a good group. It's a good group of very supportive and, like-minded people who are on the path. So it's cool. It's fun. Yeah. So tomorrow, actually, I'm going to send out a follow-up email, and the link registration will be in there.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Yes, Rachel.
Do you have, you can hear me?
Yes.
Is there a limit to the amount of people in a class? Do you say, X amount of people is too many for what we want to do?
No, I don't, because I trust it.
Okay, got it.
I would know. I haven't hit that yet. If I did, I would do something about it, because those of you who know me, I like interaction and one-on-one, and all of us being able to have time. So yeah, it just seems to work. Some people are more quieted than others. Nobody has to share, and some people do. So, and most people do, I should say. And I'll sometimes call people out, but only with love.
So you commit either to the Thursday or the Tuesday slot?
Both. And if you miss it, I do record it. I record it and I put it on the band app, and then I send it out the next day. So everybody has the recording.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you clarify? So I couldn't say, okay, I'm always on. You're either going to be on a Tuesday or
both. You come both.
Okay, twice a month, one day Thursday, one day.
Correct.
But you have the choice of times, either 12 or no, you don't have the choice of times.
No, I alternate the times so that people on the East Coast don't have to start always at 8:30 at night. That's why I've done that.
Okay, so if you can't make it, you listen to the recording.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Any other questions? Nope, we're good. I'm going to stop the recording. Oh, go ahead, Anne. Yes.
I'm a little bit confused about you saying, like, I'm imagining that you're going to be starting this the first Tuesday of November, and then if you don't join in, then you wait till December to come in.
If that's what your schedule, like dictates for you, yes. Because see, here's the thing: when you get the material, when you sign up for the course, it's an online course, so all the information that you need is there. So you actually go at your own pace. So like right now in the class, I do have people that have just started like a month ago, and some that have been with me for a while. But the thing is because we're talking about archetypes, no matter where you're at, it's the conversation is of the archetypes. So you don't feel like, oh, I'm behind, or I did, that sort of thing. You're gonna, you're gonna get what you need.
So is the first class November 3rd?
10th.
Oh, so we do have time to get our act together.
Oh yeah. I left plenty of time. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's the
Thank
time.
you.
Yes. You're welcome. You're very welcome. Dree. Oops, you're muted. There you go. Nope. Now we don't see you. Okay.
Okay. I know on the phone, I think that's how it is. I may get pushed out and have to go back in, but I don't know if you answered this. I believe the 4th Thursday is Thanksgiving. So do you have an alternate date for the 4th week?
You know what, Dree, it should not have said Thursday. I went back and changed it. It's Tuesday. Thank you for catching that for me.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's never Thursday. Thank you. I forgot.
Oh, it's never Thursday anyway?
No.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. I may have to, should I come back in or just leave now? Because it's going to force me out on my iPhone.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to close up if you don't want to come back in. That's fine. I'm going to close up here in a moment.
Are you doing any goodbye prayer?
I can, but I don't want to keep people too long because I'm a little over and I like to respect time here. So I'm not sure, but come in if you like. Okay, Julie?
I just had a quick question. Is it a self-guided online course that you do the modules on your own, and then on every other Tuesday there's a group activity or group?
Yes. The thing is that I know who's starting and who's not, so I will address that as well. I'll want to know how you're coming with picking your archetypes. I don't expect you to rush through that.
Okay.
You know, I have one person who's been in and she hasn't picked them all, and it's all good. She's coming and she's listening and figuring it out, and you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, there isn't an expectation that you have to be at a certain point. That's why I created this as to be an evergreen, because it's you know, we all have busy lives and we need to move through things at the pace we need to move through things. Sometimes timing doesn't work. So it works. As crazy as it might sound a little bit, it does work.
And then my other question is it $149 a month, or is it $149 for 3 months?
For the 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all my questions.
Okay. Anne?
If you're unable to complete the work in 3 months, is there, what's the next step then?
Then you just stay on, like do it for another 3 months.
Okay.
And because I have people that are staying on because they just want to be in it because so much comes up with it. So yeah. Because I went through I was in this program for 3 years. So this can be like, this can go on, right? But you will get a lot out of it. Trust me on it. You will get, even if you only do the 3 months, it is going to give you enough to let you dive into your own work.
Okay.
Because you'll have casted a chart for sure. And you're going to understand how to begin to interpret that chart. Yep, you will. Okay. We all good? Wonderful. Okay, so thank you all for coming this evening. It was wonderful to see some of you who I haven't seen in a long time. And yeah, let's just close with just a short, actually, I'm going to read, do I have it here? I'm going to read a prayer. Yeah, I'm going to read a prayer to you. And this is actually from Carolyn. It's called the Prayer of Entry. I cross the bridge into the silent bliss of my interior castle. I close the drawbridge and forbid all outside influences from entry into this holy place that is my soul. Here in my castle, I'm alone with God. Under God's light and companionship, I discover the depth and beauty of my soul. I embrace the power of prayer. I open myself to divine guidance. I surrender myself to become a channel for grace, healing, and service as God directs my life. Amen. I'm going to stop.